These are in listen-only mode.
Hi, my name is Becky Robinson. I'm the founder and CEO of Weaving Influence, and today we have Don't Tank Your TED Talk with Hayley Foster, the short talk expert. I'm going to introduce Hayley in a few minutes, but before I do so, I want to let you know about a few housekeeping items. In your GoToWebinar panel, we have a question panel, and we'll be welcoming your questions and comments throughout this event. Also, if you'd like to tweet live today, you can use Hayley's handle, which is on this opening slide, at Hayley Foster. And please use the hashtag #ShortTalkExpert so we can see and respond to your tweets today. One more thing, Hayley's calling in from Virginia today where they've had a whole week of everything being shut down due to snow. I live in Michigan where it was negative 15 degrees this morning. So I'm going to put it out there that if you'd like to test out this question panel, why don't you tell us what the temperature was when you got up this morning? We can see who wins the prize for the coldest temperature today. So Hayley, how are you today?
I'm good, nice and warm inside, but haven't been out in 5 days.
Oh my goodness. So you haven't been out in 5 days. What's the most exciting thing that's happened to you since you've been snowbound?
Well, I had a the coaches session for TEDx RVA scheduled with the event curator and the organizers and all the coaches for the speakers. That was canceled, and we created a virtual replacement. And so it was pretty hectic, I would say, somewhat exciting for sitting in one space, but it did in the end work out, and it turned out to be actually rather lovely. And everybody was very grateful not to have to risk life and limb to learn what they needed to do to help coach their speakers.
Yeah, wow. Well, congratulations that you pulled that off. I think so far Ken is the winner. He said it was negative 47 in Salt Lake City when he woke up this morning. And Gary, haha, 59 degrees. I don't think you're going to come even close to winning. We have someone calling in from Australia where there was a cyclone. That sounds really crazy. Wait, Ken, it was a dream. It wasn't negative 47 when you woke up. So it's not clear who's going to win. Now, Hayley, when I asked you the question about something exciting, I was actually referring to something else that might have been on Fox TV.
Oh, I thought you were talking about me personally. So I will share with you that I'm sure most of you have heard of the show American Idol, which since my kids have grown, I haven't watched in several years until this year when my son's girlfriend of 5 years, Joey Cook, was selected last night for the top 24. So that has been pretty darned exciting.
No kidding. That's enough to make me watch American Idol again. Well, I'm really excited for this content, and I'm so grateful to you, Hayley, for joining us today so our community can learn from you and your expertise. I want to take a quick moment to introduce you. Hayley has coached hundreds of TEDx presenters, CEOs, novices, educators, artists, and astronauts, and over 100 talks by speaking professionals. She was involved with TEDx since the very beginning and actually was involved in coaching the speakers for the TEDx NASA events. And I'm sure she can tell you a bit more as we talk together. She's also a mom, as she mentioned, and just a fabulous human. And I'm so thrilled to have you with us today, Hayley.
Well, thanks so much for that glowing introduction. I wasn't expecting the fabulous human part. Thank you.
My pleasure. I'm going to let you share with our friends, and we'll be back for questions later.
Great. And if it happens that somebody has something that seems to be an urgent question, do feel free to break in. Otherwise, we'll just take them at the end. You just go ahead and curate that however you see fit, all right? So when I tell people what I do, oftentimes they'll say, well, have you ever heard of TED or a TED Talk? And there are still people who say, TED who? So there will be various levels of understanding present on the call. And so in the interest of getting everyone on the same page, I'm just going to sort of give you TEDx history, and those of you who think you know may actually pick up a tip or two or a piece of information you didn't know before. So that's how we'll start. What's TED? Well, TED was the brainchild of Richard Saul Warman, and in 1984 he started putting together these conferences that would bring people together from 3 different worlds. Those worlds are technology, entertainment, and design. That's the TED of TED. By about 2001, Chris Anderson, who was at the time in magazine publishing, decided that he would like to buy it and turn it into a nonprofit. And so he decided also to invite world-renowned experts from every topic to contribute. Now, the original conference had already settled on this short talk format so that it would be 6, 12, or 18-minute talks with long periods of interaction in between to let these people from these different fields who are usually in their silos with their own people talk about the ideas that they had heard and come up with new solutions. And it was really working so well that that's when Chris Anderson thought, hey, we can broaden this. And so he began to seek out the most interesting people and let them communicate what they're passionate about, untainted by corporate influence using this nonprofit. And, so the conference went along for a few years, and it was great for the people who could attend, but there weren't that many, attendees, and it was very select. So in 2006, something really unpredictable for all of us happened. Podcasting became available. So we have this genius of a media VP at TED who said, her name is June Cohen, and she's still there, and she says, I have this whole catalog, this library of these TED Talks. I wonder what would happen if I put a few on the conference website. So she picked 6, she put them up on the website, crashed the website. So she goes, I think we're onto something. So in 2007, TED.com was born, and they got 1.5 million downloads worldwide in the first year. Now, it's easy for us now to say, oh, well, that's not that much, or, oh, what's the big deal? This was the dawn of, social media causing sensations. This is the dawn of how things went viral. So it was really miraculous at that time. And you know what? TED is a really lean organization. It is still a nonprofit. It's still fairly lean, and they wanted to bring this TED conference to more people. At the time, they had one that was in, they had the TED conference in Long Beach, and they had TED Global that was then at Oxford. And that's the 2 conferences they did. And they had all this catalog of talks that they could put on TED.com, and they thought, well, how could we expand this? How could we make this great format available for more people without us having to be the people who put on the conferences? And they sent out a beta email to the people called TEDsters who had been following those talks on TED.com and said, would anybody be interested in hosting a TED-style event? And how I got involved is at the time, and I still am a professional speaker, but at the time I'd been a professional speaker about 8 or 9 years, and my husband worked for NASA. He did strategy and innovation for NASA, and he immediately got the license for TEDx NASA. So what is TEDx? Well, here's a short video that is shown prior to every TEDx event that will help you to understand that.
From Kenya to Colombia, from Iraq to Korea, in slums, in schools, in prisons, and in theaters. Every day, people gather at TEDx events around the world to hear the best ideas bubbling up in their communities. Today, you are part of a global conversation about our shared future. So what is this TEDx? TEDx is an initiative of the TED Conference, a non-profit devoted to ideas worth spreading. We grant free licenses to allow TED-like events to spread globally. This event today is based on the TED Conference format and ideals, but is independently organized by your local community. So please make sure to thank the team of volunteers who worked so hard on today's event. It's their ideas, dedication, and time that made it all possible. It's they who booked all the speakers, and the views you'll hear today are, of course, those of those speakers, not necessarily of TED. We hope their talks spark an exciting conversation among you. It is a day for curiosity and skepticism, for openness and for critical thinking, for inspiration and for action. The more you enter into it, the more you'll take out. And now, on with the show.
So as I said, we started TEDx NASA. It was one of the first licenses granted back in 2009. And what's interesting about this is that at the time, the TED conference was a little over 700 people. And the first TEDx event in USC that TED helped put on was a little over 300 people. So ours was bigger than both of those combined. We did not know what we were doing. We were using what we thought was the TED event format, but we'd never been to TED. So one of the things that I'm very proud to say that we've contributed to this whole movement is that we were able to get live stream to carry it. And so when you look at this, you'll see there are 3 audiences in one. So you have your first audience, and they are live bodies. Those are the people in your studio audience. Could be 300 people, could be 1,300 people. Typically, the typical TED audience is usually 500 or so, TEDx audience rather, is usually 500 or so. Ours were large, and that is going to be the interaction that the speaker has real time with actual live bodies. Then the second one, and this is I'm very proud of, is we got the web streaming via live stream to participate in the event. And so you have an audience that's live, real time, online. And those people could be the volunteers in the next room. There's not enough seating for them. They could be your aunts in Peoria. It could be somebody in Pune, India. But it's live online. And then your third audience is the post-production audience. So hopefully you have a really crackerjack production crew, and they take the video of your talk and they take out all the ums and the ahs, and if you tripped off the stage, they take that out too. Pretty much they leave it the same. Hopefully you have a 3-camera event so they can do some cutting in and out for different angles, and then that's what goes online. And it has a life in post-production that will touch hopefully tens of thousands of people that you will never know. So it started out small. The first year, there were a handful of original organizers, but they were very surprised at the number of interest. And I would say, let's say, I did this last month. So since we had 8 events a day, we might be up to 13,000 TEDx events all around the world in probably we're now at just about 6 years. So that's pretty extraordinary. And what's really important about this is they're all local. So the idea is to take people who have extraordinary ideas from the local community, the people who are the artists, the people who are the entertainers, and give them play by creating this event where they can talk about their ideas with an invited audience who then has long periods of interaction to discuss what they learned. And lots of things come out of these now that make this a real community event, that things come out of, people end up having alliances they never would have had and creating consortiums. It's just a very extraordinary thing. So the gold standard of what could happen to you when you speak at a TEDx event is Brene Brown, who by now all of you have heard of her. She was at TEDx Houston. She's a professor, and when I first saw her talk on vulnerability, her now famous talk on vulnerability, it had 432,000 views, and it was not on TED.com. Once it was elevated to TED.com, it almost instantly went to over 1 million views. She was invited to talk at TED. She gave a second talk on shame at TED at 2012, and the rest is history. She is now a star on the Oprah Network and gives teleclasses, and that is very unusual but possible. So TED has changed how we share and how we consume ideas. And you could make the case that it's the most successful public speaking venue in history. So the question I think for this audience is, why is it important to you? Why is this something that you need to know about? How come you need to know about a TED-style talk and a short talk? Well, the same preparation format that's used to create these compelling TED Talks can give us a new and powerful way to tell our own stories. And we have to tell stories all the time. We tell them in meetings. We have to tell a story on a website. There are places like YouTube, online, and in fact, there's a whole new industry popping up. I have a daughter who's a high school senior, and she's very interested in online video. So we went out to VidCon in California, which is the place for people who love online video. And I have to tell you, it's like having a crystal ball. You may think you will never need a short talk, but you will. And I guarantee you, in 5 years, you will have to have an under 4-minute video online on your website and changing those out regularly to have any presence at all, because of what I saw at this conference. So if you never thought that you were going to have to do this, I'm here to tell you, you will. So TED has permeated popular culture. It's changed what the public expects from speakers. Why do you think this is? Well, it's because the bar has been raised. You see, because anybody can get quick quality content with the swipe of a finger. So you have about 15 seconds to get the audience's attention before they go swipe, swipe, swipe. Now those of us who are interested in being thought leaders may think, well, what I do is in writing, I don't really need to talk about it. And I'd say to that, how many great leaders do you recall who haven't been great speakers? Do you have to be a great speaker to be a great leader? Well, I'd say that if you really want to make an impact as a leader, public speaking is a skill you must acquire. And what's more, the world is going to short talks. You must be a proficient public speaker, and you must be able to speak in 15 minutes. So the next question is there a difference between a short talk and a TED-style talk? And at the moment, I think there's some brand confusion in the marketplace. We are now seeing conferences and associations and all kinds of events putting out requests for TED Talks from speakers. Please submit. But I don't think they really understand what that is, because there is a difference between a short talk and a TED-style talk. A short talk refers to the length of time it takes to deliver the talk. So any talk given in under 20 minutes is a short talk. A TED Talk is, by definition, a short talk, but a short talk is not necessarily a TED-style talk. And short talks have their place, but they're not the same thing. So you might use a short talk in order to, give a top 10 list of how to be the best on Twitter, or you might give a short talk at a meeting of a board of directors. But it's not necessarily going to be a TED-style talk. So what is a TED-style talk? A TED-style talk communicates a single new idea we're spreading with support and resonance in the TED style. And so my purpose is to shift the way you think about communicating about your idea, your book, your brand. And the goal is to expose you to the same technique I've used with hundreds of TEDx speakers to help you find a compelling story that will give your clients goosebumps. So what goes into a TED-style talk? Well, obviously I give half-day workshops on this. So today what I'll do is hit some of the highlights. I'll share a few secrets and give you some ideas of how you can get on the way to creating a compelling core message that's your own. And then when we get to the part, at the end, I stole it from Reddit. I, instead of having Q&A, now have AMA, which is Ask Me Anything. And you are absolutely welcome to ask me anything. Don't be shy. Are there any questions at this point?
Hi, Haley. I'm not seeing any at the moment, actually, but I would welcome everyone to. Please add the questions in the chat box, and otherwise I think we can keep going, and I'll save the questions for the next break.
Okay, so what goes into a TED-style talk? Well, there are 3 components. I'm talking about the actual structure of the talk, right? So when you're talking about your talk, you have content, you have visuals, and then you have delivery. So a TED Talk is one new idea we're spreading, and the presenter is the vehicle to best share this idea using these components. When I start coaching, I usually don't start with content or visuals, and I certainly don't start with delivery. And oftentimes I don't even research the client until after we've had an initial session, because I really want people to bring me who they are without my preconceived ideas or without what a branding expert has told them they need is the face to show the world. So in all of these, the content, the visuals, the delivery, there is something missing. And it's the secret ingredient to finding the TED Talk in you. So to find your new idea we're spreading, because you can't have a TED-style talk unless you have a core message, what do? I get asked this all the time. So the first thing that I do in my method is I talk to you about your passion. I talk to you about your personal passion. What makes you want to get up in the morning? Is it your 2-year-old grandson? Is it golf? Is it tree frogs? This is a judgment-free zone. I just want to know what makes you light up. And I will also ask you, what about your work? What about this topic makes you, what is it, the thing right now that just gets you so excited? And then we take that and we explore your knowledge. So why do we need to explore knowledge if Mr. Google can give me the answer to pretty much any question I have just by looking it up? Well, I need to know what you know. What we look at, what you've read, what you've written, the lessons you've learned in life. And then we take all of your personal passion and your professional passion and we overlay it with your knowledge. And that's where your unique core idea is found. The secret ingredient in your TED Talk is you. You see, passion yields authenticity, and it gets you really connected to your material. And to tell you the truth, like, this is the thing that makes me so excited. That's why I'm here. I want to help smart people discover their core message, to launch into cyberspace and bring as much good into the world as possible while I'm in it. So what's your passion? Is that a question?
I have a question, Haley. The first one is someone's wondering if you can move your mouse. I think it's in the middle of your visual.
Okay, there we go.
All righty. The second one is Ken is wondering if there are types of visuals you should avoid when you're putting your message together.
Yes, and we are going to get to those, so I'll hold that one until we get to that portion of the program.
All right. Thanks, Haley.
All right. So I always go for passion before preparation. For some people who are really tangible and live in the physical world, they don't understand why they're not just going straight for their talk. All right? I hope I've done a good job of helping to explain that it's the passion that yields the authenticity that makes you sizzle, and it brings who you are to the talk. And that's really important. That's going to help you select the right core idea around which to tell the story. So one of the things I'll do, and if we were in a workshop setting, is I might have you do this with a partner, because it's amazing how deep listening changes how we come up with the information. And so I will just have to let you do this in your seats by yourself. So if one of the focus questions is, out of all of your work, what is the one thing about which you are most passionate at this time? Just think about that for a minute. What would that be? And if you had a partner, the act of telling that to another person who's listening deeply and non-judgmentally changes the answer that you would give. That's my experience. So another thing that's really important is that you are able to see yourself as others see you. If you're going to be authentic, then you must know yourself. And so here are a couple of focus questions that I'll use. And these are questions that I usually have people do at their seats by themselves by taking notes. So the first question is, how would you be described by a colleague? How would you be described by a friend? How about someone who's just met you? How about someone who's known you your whole life? And if you take the time to do these with the appropriate space in between, you learn a lot about yourself. And some people will find that they're completely congruent, that they are seen the same way by all of these different people in their lives. And some people discover that they're seen very differently, and they find out what concentric circles they have, where the layers are. And this is just another way to help you as a leader or as a person with your own intellectual property, how to see yourself and how you and your people can tell the brand story your way. So you would tell it your way and your people would tell it their way, even though you've got the same brand story. You would overlay yourself on that. And you can use those questions to help generate discussion with your people if you happen to have a whole company behind you. I know we have a lot of solopreneurs as well. So another question is something that has more to do with structure. So I typically do this in dyads, and it's a question you can use, you're welcome to use, if you want to generate interest where it is that you have work to do. But this is more structural, because in the course of giving a TED Talk, one of the ways to do that is to condense stories down. So you may have a story that you tell about how you started your business, and it may take, if we wrote it down, several paragraphs. Now this is what I want you to do. I want you to tell me about your business in 2 sentences. And this is a technique, because once you get your core message, one of the ways that you give it support and resonance is by telling stories that bring out points to support that core message. But you can't tell long stories in a short period of time. So the way to do that would be to write out the whole story and then boil it down. So you might, this is an exercise where you boil down talking about your business in 2 sentences. You may take that story about how your business was started and boil it down to the essential 4 lines. There's another thing to keep in mind, and that is you have to write for the people to whom you hope to sell your idea. Because if you tell the story as yourself every time, only people like you will get the message. And that's probably not the totality of your market. And so you want to think about using keywords familiar to your target market, right? So you want to make your deal scalable, and the way you do that is to create something that turns new listeners into believers who will then become word-of-mouth advertisers for your goods or your services or your ideas. And it's always great to have a third-party validation. So for people to do that, the story has to be brief and repeatable for them. So for me, it's really important to work with influencers to deliver messages that matter for the good of humanity. Take a moment and think, what is the difference you really want to make? What are you here to do? What is the difference that you want to make that makes you different from everyone else? How does that show up in your book, in your business? So now we're going to go on to talking about actual talks. Are there any questions that I need to answer? Are we good? I'll take that as a no.
We're good.
All right.
I'm muted.
So there are many.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
We're all good.
All right, that's fine. I was just checking. It was kind of a natural break before we go on to this section, so I just wanted to check in. So there are many people who think that you can't say anything meaningful in under 5 minutes. And so I'm not going to play the videos because I don't want to take up time to do that, but I'm going to give you a couple of videos that I know that are 5 minutes and they're extraordinary. This one, A Warm Embrace That Saves Lives, is about a woman who decided that she wanted to make a difference in developing countries, and she realized that they were losing hundreds of thousands of newborns because there was no way to incubate them if they were premature. And so what she did is develop an inexpensive, and I'm talking under $20, home incubation unit for babies. And it's a really moving talk. It's one about technology, but it also touches the head, the heart, the left and right side of the brain, all things you want to do if you're constructing a talk that you hope will have resonance. One of the things you can do when you're thinking about developing your talk is find a talk you love and deconstruct it. This is one of my very favorites. It's Rick Elias, 3 Things I Learned While My Plane Crashed. Well, that's kind of an interesting title. That's because he was on the plane that Sully landed on the Hudson. I have to tell you, any parent would be well advised to listen to this 5-minute talk. Very well constructed, and will certainly help you to see how what you can do in a short period of time can be highly impactful. So here's a book that I wrote. It's a mini book. That means that you can hold it in the palm of your hand. And I've coached literally hundreds of TEDx speakers and TED-style talks for other venues. And at the time of writing this book, over 100 with speaking professionals. And what happened is a pattern started to emerge, and quite honestly, they pissed me off. Because the problem is that the methods that drive professional speaking success, they get in the way of delivering a really good TED Talk. And the world is changing. You know, our attention spans are shortening. There's not time to give your 15-minute signature story at the beginning of your talk. We have to draw people in immediately. And sometimes we find that the people who are the most experienced are actually the most arrogant. So at our very first TEDx NASA event, we were looking for cheeks and seats. And at the time, Mitch Albom, who's very well renowned, agreed to come at the end of his book tour for Have a Little Faith. And he had a foundation called the Hole in the Roof Foundation to fix churches and places of worship. And we were really hoping that he would accept the coaching and create a talk that would bring a lot of exposure for this foundation. But he didn't do that. Instead, anybody who knows TED, what's the first problem with this picture? This is the actual stage. Anyone? Well, he's got a podium. and he's reading from notes. And he basically gave the same talk that he gave to every other stop on the book tour. What a lost opportunity! So it was a disappointment, and it also played into what went to this. So one of the first mistakes is being the star of the talk. So you're the vehicle for the message. Your stories, your data are vehicles for the message. The message is the star of the talk, not you. So I'm going to extract some of the tips out of the book to share with you. And this is the first one that I have to go over. And I think, especially with the smart people who I work with, so oftentimes they're at the top in their field, and they're used to getting a lot of deference. And a TED-style event is not meant for that. You know, everybody is top in their field, or they wouldn't have been invited. So you're there to contribute to a community of thought. And I have to say that when you talk about that post-production audience, they're not even going to be in that physical space with you. That talk has to stand on its own. The idea needs to speak for itself. And if you're arrogant in that, then the message falls flat, because it's not about you. It's about the value of your idea, the value that your product, your service, your book brings. So I need you to tell me a story that makes me believe in your why. And then I'll buy your product, I'll buy your book, I'll buy your idea. That's why it's really important to be humble, and that's why it's the first mistake that I'm telling you about right now. So the next one is a structural error, and it's not starting strong, because your talk has to have an immediate twist, a hook, something that's going to make the audience want to listen to you. That's how you must start. So like a great sample strong start, there's a guy, Daniel Pink, some of you know him, and in his talk on mastery, he opens with this great line, "It's something surprising." He says, "In my youth, I did something I'd later regret. I went to law school." And it's funny, it's surprising, but it sets him up. It's like, so already I know, well, he's smart enough to have gone to law school, probably was less conventional than his parents would like, because he decided that it was a mistake, probably is a little bit satirical because he's making fun of lawyers. You see what I'm saying? It sets up, but it's also surprising. You could also ask a question or say something that flies in the face of common wisdom. I'm going to give you a couple of excerpted strong starts from some of my favorite TED videos, and we'll start with Rick Elias, and he says something surprising to start his talk.
Imagine a big explosion as you climb through 3,000 feet. Imagine a plane full of smoke. Imagine an engine going clack, 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 clack. Sounds scary.
So the next example I'm going to show you is an engaging comment, also something you might not expect. And for me, this is close to my heart. Dr. Joel Levine was the first talk that I coached in a TEDx event that made it to TED.com, which is becoming less common. Remember, this was the dawn of TEDx history, so it was a little easier to get on, but still, having 3 up there is a pretty strong accolade.
I want to talk about 4.6 billion years of history in 18 minutes. That's 300 million years per minute.
So I thought that was pretty cute. And then here is Brene Brown, who we've already discussed, and I really like the way that she opens because she gives us a lot of information. You know what, I'll debrief it afterwards. Here we go.
I'm going to tell you a little bit about my TEDx Houston talk. I woke up the morning after I gave that talk with the worst vulnerability hangover of my life.
So what I really love about that is she set up a lot of things about herself. I'm a former, TEDx speaker. She talks about her topic, which is her subject matter and the area of research, vulnerability. She herself models vulnerability by that statement, and it's funny. It loosens people up. The biggest vulnerability hangover of my life, right? So the next thing that we're going to look at is a mistake that's often made by people who are used to lecturing or giving classes. And it's also people who are mistaken in thinking that the amount of time they are given is going to determine the quality of their talk. So another mistake is insisting on the maximum time. That longer is not better, okay? And this is usually actually the first one that I encounter, because when somebody gets called for a talk, if it's to support their book on tour, they'll say, oh, you'll have 20 minutes. Or if you get an invitation for a TEDx event, oh, we're going to give you 8 minutes. And people will freak out and say, I need the maximum amount of time. No, can't you give me more time? But you don't need more time. You need the amount of time it takes to clearly communicate the new idea without wasting a word. I'm going to say that again. You need the amount of time it takes to clearly communicate your idea without wasting a word. That's how much time you need. And in fact, in the day of condensation of people's attention spans, and if you look on YouTube videos, those are all 4 minutes or under. So when you think about it, your talk will probably have more legs if it is shorter, not longer. In my work with professional speakers, I will say to them as they're trying to get into events, picture for minutes. They're looking for people who will fill in the spaces, and that is really a good time frame for you, because that is something that will be carried and people will watch the whole thing. So it's a way of looking at time that's very different than the old way of looking at time. So the next thing, and this is the question that we had, what about visuals? And one of the mistakes is having boring visuals. So fascinating visuals that punctuate your points are welcome. Charts that show instead of tell are terrific. Bullet points on a series of slides are not. And what I say about this is a picture paints 1,000 words. If it doesn't, leave it out. There are times when you can show something and your audience will be able to digest it faster than if you used a string of words to describe it. Then you need a visual. You need a visual to punctuate a point. You do not need a visual to keep your place in the program. That shouldn't be the use of your, that's what people do with bullet points on slides. They're afraid they're going to forget what they are. So if you're a person who has a fear of that, I suggest that you create compelling visuals that help anchor where you are in your talk. Bullet points are definitely out. So what kind of visuals do I mean? Okay, well, this is the joy on a child's face the first time he is experiencing running water from a faucet. This is an actual picture from a talk done by Engineers Without Borders in our TEDx NASA at Silicon Valley event. And the San Francisco chapter built this water transportation system for a village that never had it before. And this is a 4-year-old boy, and that is the first time he has had this experience. As many words as I used could not possibly communicate what you were seeing right here. That's the kind of visual that you need. Sometimes you need a chart. If you need a chart, look for different kinds of infographics that you can use to illustrate the point. And the reason you would do that is if you have to consolidate information, sometimes it's comparisons there might be a large amount of information that if you showed a picture of it, we would get instantly. It would be interesting. It's somewhat, in this case, whimsical with the colors, and you could move on very quickly. The thing you have to remember about visuals is that human beings typically let visual trump audio. So anything that is put up on a screen, whatever is being said is going to have the volume turned down. Now, it could be for a millisecond, because you could pretty much, I mean, you can metabolize this particular slide pretty quickly, but sometimes it's more intricate and you have to see something, and please remember that what you say may not be heard quite as well while they're looking at that. Here's another picture. This is something that would be very hard to describe because it's a star formation. And this is from the Hubble telescope. And you may not have a science talk like this, but this is just one demonstration of something that, how could I describe this to you? If you were talking about scientific things that had some extraordinary visuals, you would certainly want to use them. You might actually use a short video clip, but you really want visuals to be compelling to justify their use. What I usually say to speakers is, there is no need to decorate your talk. So with that, I think I've gone through some of what the most important mistakes are. And now it's time for AMA, which I told you I stole from Reddit. I don't do question and answers anymore. I do Ask Me Anything.
Super, Hayley. So one question I have is, will we be sharing your slides with our attendees? I'm thinking, someone is asking if we're going to share these slides, and I'm thinking that we're not. So can you clear that up, Hayley?
Oh, yeah, no, I won't be sharing the slides, but I think that this webinar will be available.
It will.
To those people.
We are recording. The second question is, where can people find your book?
There you go.
All right.
So my website is www.shorttalkexpert.com. The book's right there. You can click on it. And then if you want to send me an email because you have some burning question that you think will take up too much time or whatever, you're welcome to contact me, Hayley at shorttalkexpert.com. And I can be reached at this Twitter handle and also this phone number.
Great. So I have another question for you from Jesse, and he or she, I'm not sure, is asking, does charisma play a role in the effectiveness of the connection with the audience?
No. Authenticity beats charisma. I think that charismatic speakers can be authentic, but they can also be too highly polished. So the charisma isn't really what carries you. It's your connection to yourself and to the idea and how authentically you can communicate that.
So someone's asking as a follow-up, and Jesse is a he, so thank you to Jesse. But as a follow-up, Ken is wondering how you would actually define charisma, Hayley.
Well, when I think of charisma, I think it as somebody, it's the person who walks into the room and everybody notices them even if they don't say anything. And to me, when I think about a charismatic speaker, there are very highly effective charismatic speakers who, they kind of sizzle on the stage, but I know some really fabulous speakers who don't sizzle at all. And what you connect to is who they are, and they're passionate about their message. So you can actually, be kind of ordinary and give a really great talk.
That's encouraging. Thanks. So Ruth is wondering, Hayley, if you teach people to learn their talk or if that's not part of what you do.
Yes. So that's another point in the book. But you have to practice, and there's this fine line between practicing thoroughly and having too much polish. And people do this in various ways. So I always say, You do not want the first time you give this talk to be in front of the audience you were selected to deliver it for. You want to have real feedback from real people ahead of time. And so in constructing talks, yes, I do work on the content, the visuals, and the delivery. And one of the points that stick for people in delivery is how to learn their talk. And one of the things that I've learned I've been doing this about 6 years, I've learned over time to ask people how they studied in school. So if you have an advanced degree or a college degree, and some people just even from high school, how did you learn the material you were supposed to master? And so I've sort of got this little list of different ways that I've collected from people over the years. So I have one gal who's an artist, and she made 5x8 cards where she drew pictures for herself to help learn her talk. I have a brain injured client that chunked her talk down into different pieces. So she memorized hers, which is not always necessary, but she memorized hers, and she memorized it in chunks that made sense to her. I had a CIO who made a PowerPoint storyboard that she could go through, and that was a duet talk, and her partner had gone to law school, and she always wrote out all of her arguments. So she wrote out her arguments. I think the most interesting one is I had a speaker, and we didn't realize it until we were practicing in the hotel at 6:30 in the morning the day of the event. So we're doing that, and it occurs to her that it's body memory. She was a gymnast at one time, and she kept tripping on this one portion of her talk, and we realized that we had to reprogram where it was in her body and where she was standing in order to get her to get it right. So there are many ways to do this, but yes, I have all kinds of training that talk about how to develop your content, create your visuals, and then also mastering delivery, which has many components.
Super. So lots of questions pouring in. This next one, Hayley, can people create TED Talks to use in a community engagement concept, for example, like for a city government? Melinda is wondering about this.
Now, are you talking about can an individual create a TED Talk, or does a municipality want to get a TEDx license to put on an event?
Yeah, I think the question is could an individual do something like that?
Okay, could an individual create an event, or could an individual just give a talk that is a TED-style talk in some other venue?
I think that's the question, but Melinda, if you want to type in and clarify, that would be great. I think the question is, can an individual create a TED-style talk? Oh, yes. Well, so she's wondering about a municipality doing this. She's thinking there might be a way to use the TED Talk concept to engage citizens in discussion.
Yes, and if you would want to create a TEDx event, it's actually not very difficult to get a license for 100 people. You'd have to be qualified to get a license for 300, but the TEDx format, the good thing about this is it's a community of people who all want to do the same thing, and you've got years of collective experience available for free online so that you wouldn't have to figure out how to do it. In fact, I'm going to the TEDx organizers global meeting in Vancouver in March, where I'm also very honored to be asked to speak to organizers about how to get the best out of their speakers. And we share all the time. We have places online that we share. All of this is already coordinated. And so, yes, you could create your own event and use TED-style talks in the event. And you could sort of pattern it on a TED-style event. I think that you might as well use the renown of the TEDx event and go ahead and get the license, and then you'd have support. But that's just my opinion. If you want to talk to me about it offline, this is like my very favorite thing to do. Please contact me.
Sounds great. Melinda, it sounds like you should use that phone number on the last slide, or perhaps email Hayley offline. So here's a great question that came in from Karen. If you could give only one piece of advice about giving an effective speech, what would it be?
Hone your original core message.
Okay.
So that takes, you have to discover it first.
Great. So Hayley, I'm going to ask a question that hasn't come into our questions, but I know was asked a lot the last time we did this webinar together. Suppose I want to get my own opportunity to present at TEDx. What advice would you give me about landing the chance to appear at a TEDx event?
Well, as I said, they're all locally organized, and so there's many ways for speaker selection as there are events. There are people who have speaker selection committees. There are people who put out a website call for speakers. You can go to TED.com and then go to TEDx events, and you'll see a map. And on that map, we'll have all these little red X's about where all of the events are coming up. And it'll also have a list of all the events for that day, which is so funny because it used to be, the events for the month were on that page. Now, there's barely enough room for the events for the day. And what you want to do is look for something that's coming up probably 4 months out or later. Once in a while you can get one in 3 months, but you want to see what's going to be happening in 4 months, and you want to see if there's something in your local area, because these are meant for community involvement. Now, not to say that people aren't taken, I've sent speakers across the country to speak at an event, but most of the time you have a better chance of, if you're known in your community or if people understand you've done something wonderful, or you maybe write a column for a newspaper, they're going to be interested in you. And you need to just get in touch with those organizers and find out how they make their speaker selections. You can also nominate yourself. You can nominate yourself to TED, actually. That doesn't tend to work out very well because usually TED picks you at this point, unless you discovered a new kind of algae on Mars. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't expect that to happen, although I'd be very happy for you if it did. And I'd certainly be willing to coach you for that.
All right. Well, Hayley, I want to thank you so much for spending your snowy Friday afternoon sharing your expertise with us. It's been tremendous. And I want to give you a chance to say one more thing to this group. I will be sending some follow-up emails so you can share this recording with others who you know who might be able to benefit from Hayley's expertise. And so, Hayley, anything that you want to say in parting to this group?
I want to say two things. And one was an invitation by you, and that is, watch American Idol and vote for Joey Cook.
Yes, I'm going to do that for sure.
Right. And then the second thing is that I am so blessed to know that I am here to work with influencers to deliver messages that matter for the good of humanity. And what I want for you is to know why you are here.
That's a challenging thought as we wrap up this hour together. Thank you so much, Hayley, for sharing your passion and energy, and best wishes that soon the weather will improve where you live. And thanks to all of you for tuning in today. Have a great Friday.